debate tonight. Fresh turbulence for cash-strapped Jet Airways. Earlier today, Jet's Maintenance Engineers Union wrote to the aviation regulator that 3 months of salary was overdue. They added that non-payment of salaries adversely affected the psychological condition of engineers, which would put flight safety at risk. Then the second big jolt of the troubled airways came from Jet Airways' domestic pilot body. The pilots have threatened to stop flying if salary dues are not cleared by the end of this month.
Pilots have decided that in case if there is no resolution which is reached by 31st of March, then from 1st of April, they have decided that they are not going to continue flying the aircrafts.
Today, after a number of Jet Airways flights were cancelled, the centre was forced to step in. Civil Aviation Minister Suresh Prabhu directed Secretary and senior officials of the DGCA to take stock of grounding of planes by Jet Airways, advance bookings, cancellations, refunds and safety issues.
The Jet Airways was asked to maintain worthiness of the flights that were being used. At the same time, they were told that they should avoid the last-minute cancellations or change in the schedule so that the passengers should not get affected. And the other thing was that they were asked to ensure that the affected passengers are duly compensated.
Mirror now asks, is passenger safety being compromised by the aviation industry? Who should bail out cash-strapped Jet Airways? Let's debate.
Good evening. You're watching the Urban Debate. I'm Kavita Krishnan. The prognosis is grim. Jet Airways owes Indian banks 8,200 crore rupees in loan repayments. Of its fleet of 119 airplanes, right now, only 41 are operational. Now that is according to the DGCA. The rest of the fleet has been grounded. With this reduced fleet, Jet can operate only about 140 flights a day. This is down from the 650 flights it operated when it was at its peak. The airline has been struggling to pay aircraft lease rentals, the rent that it owes for leasing out an aircraft or an airplane. It has been struggling to pay staff salaries. It is scrambling for funds to stay afloat. The airline's own engineers earlier raised questions on the safety of the aircraft, a statement which they later withdrew. Now, in under a decade, we've seen 2 airlines shut down. 2 airlines were bought out. Jet itself and one other airline has been on the brink once earlier, which leads us to our big questions that we're asking our panel this evening. Is passenger safety being compromised in a bid by the airline to stay afloat? Who will bail out cash-strapped Jet Airways? And why is India's aviation sector in such a mess? These are the questions we'll put to our panelists. Joining us are Sudhakar Reddy, who is the National President, Air Passengers Association of India; Harshvardhan, who is an aviation expert; Jitendra Bhargav, also an aviation expert; Arijit Burman, Senior Editor from the Economic Times; Thomas Franco, former General Secretary of All India Bank Officers Confederation, will also be joining us in a bit. Now, that's the questions that we have for you, gentlemen, tonight. I will, of course, begin over here with Sudhakar Reddy. You had tweeted out earlier, a day or 2 days back, and you had specifically said that flights are being cancelled left, right and centre, and one of the things that you brought up is whether Jet Airways should stop advance bookings. Sudhakar Reddy?
Yeah, I mean, we referred to it because there are 3 other occasions when the passengers have lost a lot of money when they did the forward booking, when Paramount Airways went out of circulation, and then Kingfisher, and then SpiceJet had problems, if you remember 5 years ago in 2014. So we feel that such a situation should not arise. Whereas at the same time, while we are interested in Jet Airways reviving its plans for flying its normal schedules over a period of time, which will benefit the passengers ultimately. You will agree with me that more competition in the air, there will be it is better for a consumer. And today, what is happening is, because of shortage of number of flights, the other airlines which have schedules intact are taking advantage of the situation, which we feel cannot be allowed.
Right. In fact, what Mr. Reddy is saying right now makes perfect sense to me as a passenger. But look at it from another point of view, and Arijit Burman, I would like you to weigh in on that. We know that Jet Airways is in a bad shape, and that is putting it lightly. They have a ton of debt on their books. They're not being able to make payments, and now if you stop advance bookings, where does that leave the airline? Is it a fair solution, or is Sudhakar Reddy being fair over here when he's saying that passengers are suffering, passengers are being overcharged, and you should not be giving out advance bookings? Where do you stand?
No, I have a very simple question, which is, it's been almost a month that we have been told that there's a negotiation going on with all the stakeholders of Jet. So you have Mr. Goel, you have Etihad, their partner, you have the banks. Now, what is pretty clear is that no solution, we have not reached or seen any tangible solution on ground. Now, why is it that Mr. Goel is still calling the shots is a key question that needs to be asked. Why isn't the board taking a far more proactive role and taking a decision as to what should be the road ahead? Why is the government saying different things at different times? First, you had Suresh Prabhu, the minister himself, saying that this is a private enterprise. Why should the government intervene? Today, there are news reports that the government officials are telling banks to bail out Jet. Now, if the only person who can logically put in more money and turn Jet around is Etihad, but the government has also tied its hands. So there is a solution available. What amazes me is that the government, for a variety of reasons, is not willing to accept those solutions.
Right. Arijit Burman, you said there is a solution available. When you say there's a solution available, are you talking about Etihad, or is there another solution that you have in mind? What are you trying to tell us?
No, I'm talking about Etihad. See, Etihad is willing to put more money. Etihad has always said that they're willing to put more money. The question is, now why is there a stalemate? The stalemate is there because Etihad wants to put more money and wants to increase its stake. Now, the moment it does that, there is an open offer that gets triggered, so it has to call for more shares. Now, there is a provision in the law that can give an exemption. Now, that exemption has to come from SEBI. In the past, in aviation sector itself, in this case of SpiceJet, those exemptions were sought and were given. Now, why is the government or the regulators like SEBI being hesitant this time around? Is it because it's election season and they don't want to be seen to be favoring one? I mean, that is a very fundamental problem. There is a partner who's still willing to put more money in Jet, turn things around, and this is a partner who's already in this JV for a long time. So all it's asking for is the exemption, but it's not getting. So that's where things are stuck. And Naresh Goel, I mean, we castigate our politicians. I remember when Lalu Prasad Yadav went to jail, and before that anointed Rabri Devi, he was castigated. Now Naresh Goel, he wants to step down, wants to put his son in the board. I mean, where is the corporate governance in this?
Right. And in fact, let me pick up that other question that you raised and bring in Jitendra Bhargav over here. It does seem like everybody is walking on eggshells around Jet over here. Whether it is the banks, whether it is the government, if the government is involved, all of them are playing very safe. What is the reason for that? Why not let Etihad, if Etihad is willing to bring in the money, obviously this kind of money will come with conditions, why not let that happen?
You see, we must understand the market dynamics. The reality is that full service carriers for quarters after quarters have not been able to generate profit. ATF was at one time a factor, but the reality is that our airlines have been garnering market share at the expense of profitability by selling tickets at much less than the cost of producing a seat. So when you do this over a sustained period, your balance sheet will only bleed. It is not a question of efficiency factor. The reality is that there is something systemically wrong in our market environment. No airline is willing to jack up fares to a certain level. A, we are a price-sensitive market. It has an immediate impact on the growth. The second is, what we are overlooking is that a large number of aircrafts are in the pipeline. Indigo, SpiceJet, Jet Airways included have ordered huge number of aircraft for induction in the coming years. They would naturally not like market growth rate to go down because that would nullify the need for getting more aircraft and inducting them. Now, when you are in such a pitiable situation, what do? Now, let's look at from the Etihad perspective, or for that matter, anybody. I had tweeted in the morning today that barring banks under extraneous compulsion and pressure, nobody is going to put in money when they know that money is not going to generate surplus or they're going to get their returns on the investment they make. So with the market dynamics and such, it is very difficult for Jet to get money for prolonging its life. Now, as regarding SEBI and all, let me explain to you. If we go back to 2012, when they first bought 24% equity Etihad, it wasn't an easy game for it. They were reluctant. They paid a huge price. And why did they pay? The price is something to be, part of the corruption scene that took place at that time. 50,000 seats were doled out to Etihad as a latent part of the agreement. Bureaucrats went and sat down in Abu Dhabi, signed the agreement on the eve of the agreement between Jet and Etihad. So when you have that kind of a culture, Etihad has got used to it. Now that is why they want to come out of it, because they don't see any gain coming out of Jet. The conditions that Naresh Goyal must step aside. You can't say, okay, Naresh Goyal will be substituted by his son. Now, I quite agree with them that it's no kind of corporate governance that you can have. With the person who has nurtured an airline for 25 years, one, he is reluctant to part company. It's difficult. And he should have looked at the Air India example. Government also was not willing to divest in Air India when the time was ripe. And we saw the value erosion of Air India. So a similar thing has happened with Jet. The time to exit was at least a year ago. Now he has delayed it. He's going to pay for the consequences. Now we can always say, okay, the government, because we're on the eve of elections, 23,000 jobs are at stake. Now what do? Government is also compelled to come into the thing. Suresh Prabhu did make a statement earlier that we've got nothing to do with Jet's revival or survival, right? That's a picture. That's right, because most people give an example that if government can fund Air India, why not Jet Airways? Conveniently forgetting that the government of India is the promoter of Air India and Naresh Goyal is the promoter of Jet Airways. The benefits of the happy days of Jet Airways went to Naresh Goyal and the other promoters, not to the government of India. It can't be that when the gains accrue, it's Naresh Goyal's benefit. When the money is to be put in and for survival, the government must step in. So first, market dynamics, we have to be understood. And in that perspective, when you look at Jet Airways' pitiable situation, and then is the second thing, who can come in with money and ensure the Jet survives? Because if you look at from the Indian aviation industry perspective, yes, we can't afford an airline going under. It's huge capacity. The fares, as Sudhakar Reddy very rightly said, the fares have already gone up. You will have problems when we get into a peak period of travel. So this will not be a healthy sign for the industry.
Right. In fact, let me bring in Harshvardhan over here. Mr. Harshvardhan, if you could, take off from where, from what Jitendra Bhargav just told us. why is it that our aviation sector is in such a mess? We've seen 2 airlines that have shut shop. We've seen 2 airlines that have been bought out. Like I said earlier, 2 airlines which were on the brink and came back and revived. And Jet now is in a bad shape one more time. This is the second time this is happening to Jet. Why is it that it is so difficult for an airline to survive in India?
Well, it's not a question of airlines surviving in India. When you go for deregulation and privatization of this sector, or any sector for that matter, it is survival of the fittest. And you know what is happening in India, if you look at, if you compare it with the US deregulation in 80s and 90s, you will find a lot of similarity. In that also many airlines were coming up and many airlines were going down. In fact, their rates were much higher than us because here there are a lot of entry barriers, so not many players have entered this market as yet. So that's basically an industrial system. In fact, around 2002, 2003, the US Airlines setup actually realized that they have to rationalize the capacity, and for a long time they went on to the spirit of consolidation. That is why you find that the US industry is much more robust today. So that correction factor will come in the Indian aviation also. But you know, man, the genesis of these problems are very common and known to everybody. Firstly, you have excessive capacity deployment when the growth is happening. You know, man, last 1 year alone we added over 100 aircrafts, over a size of about 700 aircrafts. And compare it with the total aircraft fleet in India in 2002, which was just about 100 aircraft. So the kind of full industry we are adding every year. Now the other factor is that because we are adding more and more capacity, and this is the same scenario before Kingfisher went down, the basic problem is that we are only fighting for the market share. We haven't learned much with the Kingfisher experience. So basically, we are only trying to add more capacity. Even Jet Airways, knowing that their fundamentals were not very strong, they've been going in for massive expansion. And because of that expansion, if you cannot sustain your operations, if you look at their finances, in last 9 months, they have nearly lost 3,000 crores in their operating costs. And out of it, if you take out the depreciation of about 300 crores, 2,700 crores is a pure cash loss that the organization suffered. Coming to the forward booking profile also, if you look at the forward booking profile, which has gone down, their net deficit to cash flow to cash, Jet Airways in last 6 months alone, in last 8 months alone is almost of the order of 5,000 crores. So the basic point is that airlines has reached a point of no return, and I see no reason why should government intervene and who is going to be benefit out of it. Here again, you know, there has been a lot of reference made to Jet Airways. I've been commenting on a few things in last 6 to 8 months ever since the jet problem started. Frankly speaking, it is more a kind of a public relations exercise that Jet is interested, or Tatas were interested. The kind of financial they have reached, nobody would want to bail out. The only option is that you hand over, I mean, you sell the airlines to not a strategic investor, but to an outright buyer. That is the only option, because then you build up some kind of market confidence. With the existing promoters, once you lose the market confidence, the investment is of no use, you know, because the more you pump in, the more it goes in servicing the debt or reducing liabilities. You know, the cycle, they have a broken cycle of cash flow and operations now.
Harshvardhan, let me bring in, we also have on the phone line with us right now. We also have with us Dheeraj Mathur, who's partner and leader aerospace and defense at PwC, joining us on the phone. Dheeraj, I'm going to use a term that is largely used with, that was last used with banks. Now, we were talking about consequences over here, and Jitendra Bhargav did point out that it will lead to massive job loss if Jet Airways were to fold, shut shop. It would obviously lead to a spike in airfares over here. And of course, it will put a huge question mark on the sale of Air India, which we know that the government is very keen to divest right now. So if you put all of that, Do you think Jet Airways right now for India is too big to fail, and is that the reason why we are seeing that government, banks, everybody, the DGC, all of them are walking, sort of walking on eggshells around the airline?
Well, let me put it this way. Jet is the second largest carrier by market share, all right? It's also the second largest, probably, or third largest in terms of number of aircraft. Now, the fact is that while it is, of course, survival of the fittest and so on, but this is not a perfectly competitive market. There are many market imperfections here. Look at the price of ATS. It's exorbitant. Look at the infrastructure at airports. So this is not a perfectly competitive market in the sense that players are not allowed to operate in purely competitive in a purely competitive environment. You have the route dispersal policy where you're imposing a social obligation on companies that are operating on a wafer-thin margin. So you have to understand that this is a typical market. This is not a typical market. This is an atypical market. And therefore, you can't just say that, survival of the fittest and market forces will apply. Of course, market forces will apply. Of course, the fittest will survive. But the role of the government cannot be discounted in creating the situation that we are in today and in resolving it moving forward. So, therefore, net, I think it is important that and this is not unheard of, a purely capitalistic country and economy like the United States, in the 2009 meltdown, the government did bail out the large banks and the large auto companies. And those companies did repay their debt. They did turn around. So we need to keep in mind that the airline sector is very vulnerable because of various fundamental reasons. There is a huge drag on this sector, and those reasons are largely under the control of the government. So it is incumbent on the government to make sure that we have a healthy and competitive sector. Now, as far as capacity is concerned, I have just this to say that we are a highly underserved market. We are barely at the tip of the iceberg in terms of potential demand. All the demand and all the fight for market share is essentially on the trunk routes. We have yet to capture the population beyond the trunk routes. Now, hopefully, UDAN and this air connectivity scheme will stimulate that demand and eventually will lead to a situation where a larger part of the country and a much larger market is going to get served.
Right. Do stay with us, Dheeraj Mathur. Let me bring in a banker here. That was an interesting point you made. Thomas Franco, do you think it is fair to expect banks to take a haircut once again? Do you think it is fair that Jet Airways over here, in effect, gets a bailout?
Not at all. Banks should not be forced to take a haircut. Banks should not be forced to further provide credit and save Jet Airways. See, one difference we are seeing now is that when Air India was not doing well, they were making losses. Everybody was saying that let it be sold, let it be given to the private sector. But now a private sector airline is failing because of its inefficiency. It is because of the mismanagement by the owner of the Jet Airways, Mr. Naresh Goyal. It is failing, and now they want the banks to save. Why should the banks get into this business of saving these airlines? When you say that it is a business, it is for them to compete in the market and see if they are. Somebody was talking about survival of the fittest. That is right. When it is market, it is only the survival of the fittest. If they cannot survive, they should quit. They should sell it to Etihad or somebody else. But why ask the public sector banks to save them? That is not at all correct. And you are using a different criteria for Air India, which is a public sector airlines, which has done a human service for the country. But you are using another criteria for Jet Airways, which is a private airlines, whose owner is sitting abroad. Same like Vijay Malaya, Jatin Matta, Nirav Modi, one more person is sitting abroad, and we are trying to save his airlines. That is not at all correct.
Right. Arijit Burman, where do you stand on that? Do you think it is fair to expect public money to be used over here to, sort of bail out Jet Airways just because the consequences are too dire to think of?
No, not at all. And I fully agree with the last speaker that, why is Jet in trouble in the first place? Its cost structures are haywire. Unlike an Indigo or even a Go, its sale and leaseback policies have been all over the place. It hasn't dealt with its ally, which is Etihad, in the most professional way. I'll give you an example. You already have Etihad as a partner. Now you go and try to negotiate with Etihad's rival, which is Air France and KLM. And why would then Etihad tolerate? But they still have, and they would still want to put more money and bail the airline. But what is amazing is that the private or the whims and fancy of one individual, which is Mr. Naresh Goyal, is what seemed to be stalling the entire negotiation process. I mean, he, for the longest time, didn't want to relent. Finally, he says, okay, I'm stepping down, but again, my son will come on the board. I mean, why can't the banks or anybody else or the shareholders or the board come in and say, okay, we run the company, let there be a specialist. We already have a bankruptcy, process. It can go to bankruptcy. Now, that's another debate altogether because it's a service industry, whether a services company which has a strong brand should go to bankruptcy. But in the US, it would have gone to Chapter 11. We have seen several airlines around the world who filed for bankruptcy and then have come out of bankruptcy. But then there has to be some stern measure. The founder or the promoters can't take this as a fiefdom and be not answerable to anybody. And we have public money bailing a private enterprise like Jet. And this is not the first time that Jet is in trouble. Every 2 or 3 years, it's in an air pocket, literally.
Right. So very quickly, let me ask the rest of my panel, where do they stand as far as Jet getting a bailout on public money is concerned? Sudhakar Reddy, very quickly, yes or no, should Jet get a bailout?
Of course, it should get a bailout because already today the latest news is that Punjab National Bank is going to invoke the pledge of the entire holding of Mr. Naresh Goyal, which constitutes 51%.
Mr. Reddy, I'm sorry. Let me just interrupt you over there. Let me just interrupt you over there. You are representing the passengers over here. Now, here are the things that we are up against. We are up against the fact that here's an airline who is not honoring the bookings that were done, say 2 or 3 months in advance. Flights are being cancelled at the last minute, which means you are then subject to higher fares from the competition. The other thing that you're looking at is fares that could go up, considering the fact that such a lot of supply has been pulled out of market. The third thing, of course, and the most worrisome thing according to me, is the fact that the airline's own engineers earlier came out and said that the flight is probably unsafe. Now, keeping all of that in perspective, do you still think public money, your money, my money, the money that we pay as taxpayers should be used to bail out this airline?
Yes, if it is going to benefit the passenger at large, which is certainly going to happen because today the airfares have gone up between Mumbai and Bangalore alone at 25,000 rupees, which is absolutely not acceptable. And there has to be a resolution mechanism to find out how to get out of this whole mess, and the entire fleet is back into operation and the normalcy is resumed. I am pretty confident that it is possible if all agencies which are involved or all the stakeholders who are involved, barring Naresh Goyal, there can be a resolution and it is possible to do that.
Right, we
in
seem
the
to,
interest of the
right,
passengers.
right. We seem to be tied over here. What about you, Harshvardhan? Do you think Jet Airways should be bailed out using public money?
You see, to be very honest, I think Jet has reached the point of no return. Any pumping in money would only be pushing it down the drain because it is not such a simple solution. You know, you have to find a long-term solution. You have to follow the SpiceJet way. SpiceJet was closed down for a while, then you restructured everything and then restarted. The way you are doing a slow bleeding and slow death, it is actually more painful and more loss oriented, and it actually hurts the sector and the people more. So, and they're coming to the fare issues, which my friends have said, it will settle down. You know, it's just because there is a sudden clamoring of seats because of last minute cancellation. The fares have gone up. Give it another month or so, the fares will settle down, which is what happened in case of Kingfisher also. So I don't see any reason the government should intervene. And where is the money with the government itself? You know, government itself is looking for funding, and the bank themselves are looking for funding. Now you already have 6 to 8 lakh crores of NPA. Why do you want to create more NPAs in a dead asset?
Exactly. What about you, Jitendra Bhargav? Where do you stand?
I am opposed to it in principle, because even if government was to put in money at this juncture, what happens 6 months from now? As I said earlier, there is no profitability for Jet on the horizon because of the business model. Full service carriers are not being able to break even like the low cost carriers, SpiceJet and Indigo. Now, as long as they keep sustaining losses, how much money will they put? And once banks take the 50% majority shareholding, the onus will be on them to keep it alive. Now, I agree with Harshvardhan when he says that it's a temporary phenomenon. You've suddenly withdrawn X number of aircraft from the market, leading to chaotic situation, fares going up. But with the induction of more aircraft by Indigo and SpiceJet, unfortunate part is that 737 bags also got grounded around the same time. You will have this easing of situation after a few months. But if you want to put in government money here, A, it creates a precedent. B, you will have to keep pumping money and assume ownership, who you can't hold Jet Airways responsible and the rest will responsible subsequent to it. But the basic thing is a public perception needs to be created, and Mr. Sudhakar Reddy can play a role in it, that we airlines are being stupid in stimulating the market by charging lower fares at the expense of profitability, which in the long term is not desirable. Unfortunate part is Parliamentary Consultative Committee also came down heavily on the airlines, that they are fleecing it. If airlines were indeed fleecing the passengers, then the balance sheets wouldn't have been showing losses quarter after quarter, barring the last 2 quarters where Indigo and SpiceJet made profit, but everybody else make losses. So there is to be a reality check. Are we running our airline industry properly?
Efficient.
Are they being economically viable? If not, what needs to be done? And we cannot be always looking towards the government for action. The action must come from within the airline industry.
Right. Let me bring in Arijit Burman over here. The other thing that really worries me as as someone who uses airlines is what the engineers came out and said earlier today. The letter that they wrote, where they said that we are not being paid our salaries. Psychologically, this does affect us, and also the fact that the airlines, the aeroplane may be unsafe, that maintenance, etc. there's a big question mark right now on the maintenance of the aircraft. Now, is that something one would expect, one should expect, if a particular airline is not doing that well economically, if it has a lot of debt on its books, if it doesn't have money?
You can say that, but should it compromise on security and safety? No. But reality is the fact that, reality is that they are not getting paid. So obviously there's stress. This has happened in the past with Jet. This is what I'm repeating, that why is it that Jet every 2 or 3 years, would face the same set of problems in terms of its, cash flow management, in terms of its financials. It's perpetually in stress. It's primarily because its business model is flawed. Now, until and unless you fix that, you will have all these problems recurring. You can, you can kick the can, but very soon, it's going to resurface. Again, you're going to face the same set of problems. And until then, passengers are worried whether they should be flying, whether flying jet because of the safety and security issues. And mind you, forget just jet. I mean, the entire industry around the world, we've seen what has happened to Lion Air, we've seen what's happened to Ethiopian Air in the past, we've seen what's happened to Malaysian Air. So for a variety of reasons, safety is becoming a very strong narrative, and rightly so. Now, you can say it is expected because, people are not getting paid. So obviously, it's not a happy place for them. Now, but should it happen? Certainly not.
Right. Let me bring in one of our viewers who's just called in. R.K. Sharma's on the phone line from Mumbai. Mr. Sharma, go on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd just like to ask your esteemed panel a couple of points. Firstly, everyone's talking about the banks bailing out Jet. When they say the bank's bailing out Jet, that's the taxpayers' money, right? That's my money in the bank. Why will my money go to a private entity who's running his business badly? I don't understand that. I can start a business tomorrow and then I can expect the government to save me from it. It's a private business. They charge tons of money for each ticket. Why is the taxpayers' money going out to bail out a Jet Airways if Naresh Goyal doesn't know how to run his company? Same thing, then we can bail out Malia also, we can bail out Choksi also, let's just bail out everyone. And why can't the IMF just bail out India and clean out all the loans that we have? If that's the kind of thought process you're all going to live in, then that should be the case. And of course, pilots not working, that's completely fair. If nobody gets paid salaries, if you're working overtime, anyways, Jet makes pilots work overtime. I'm an ex-flyer, my friends work as pilots over there. You understand how it takes a toll, and of course, safety will be hampered. These are my two main points on this.
Right, and R.K. Sharma, that's a valid point. In fact, my producer just said, and I think he has a point as well. He says that I have an education loan, why shouldn't I be bailed out? And for that matter, let me add, I have a home loan, why shouldn't I be bailed out? The queue is just going to get longer and longer. The fact is, you are doing business, and business comes with its ups and downs, with its risks and rewards. And it's up to you as a business person how you manage it. Let me bring in Dheeraj Mathur over here. Right, we seem to have lost Dheeraj Mathur, but Sudhakara Reddy, as passenger, you brought up the issue of airfares and the issue of ticket bookings being cancelled. But shouldn't the issue of safety worry passengers more?
Certainly, that's the primary importance in any system, especially the airline industry. And, Jet Airways, going by their last 25 years history of safety, I think it has been one of the best performing airlines in terms of safety. So all this, is out of emotions, where all the engineers express their feelings for not receiving salaries. And I have full faith in Jet as far as their management is concerned. I am talking of management from the CEO level downwards and not at the board level, because that is where I have no confidence. But certainly the CEO and below him, they have an excellent team of managers who have been there for a long time. And safety will never be compromised. Right. From my point.
Very quickly, I have very little time left on the clock. I need to get in the opinions of 4 people over here. I'll begin with you, Thomas Franco. We have a model in how Satyam was turned around. The government did step in over there. The government didn't bail out Satyam. The government worked, brought in a specialist who knew the sector, who understood the sector, and then they turned around Satyam. Is that something we could look at for Jet Airways, considering the risks if the consequences if Jet Airways fails? Is that something that you would look at, the Satyam route?
No, in this case, I have a strong doubt that Mr. Naresh Goyal must have diverted funds. I am a frequent flyer of Jet Airways, and I have seen that the staff are quite efficient. The timings were very good. The HR department is very good. As somebody was saying, the management is good. But it is Naresh Goyal who might have diverted money. Otherwise, this crisis will not be coming again and again.
Right.
And why the banks and others should go and bail out and take it over and run it. Banks are being asked to take over, and banks do not have expertise in running an airline. So in this case, I do not agree to that proposal that somebody should take over and run it. That is not the solution. He has to be brought down, and he has to be treated as a person who is a willful defaulter, and action should be taken.
Right. Harshvardhan, what do you think?
You see, as far as Satyam and Jet Airways situation is concerned, you cannot compare the two. The reason being that Satyam had the strength of a very competent technical team, and more than that, the profitability of their product was very high. So all it needed was revamping of management and stopping the siphoning of money. And Satyam overnight started showing viability. You know, there was profitability. Here the situation is that the viability doesn't exist, and the industry situation.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. I have very little time. Yeah, Jitendra Bhargav, what do you think? Very quickly.
You see, again, I would agree with Harshvardhan that they are not comparable for the simple reason that the profitability of the IT industry, here you can put it on track, but you are still not assured of profitability.
That is because of the environment.
And forget what Mr. Sudhakar Reddy said about the past reputation and the team that Jet Airways. Jet Airways will be looked at from what it is today. If they're flying 41 aircraft with X number of percentage of market share, that's the value they bring it on the table. And it will erode as you go along. And this is where I said earlier, the time to exit from Naresh Goyal was at least 12 months earlier. He has delayed the process and paid a price for it.
Right. Let me bring in Arijit Barman. Arijit Barman, last word to you. What do you think? A Satyam type solution, would that work for Jet?
No, Satyam was a fraud. I mean, in ILNFS also, we have seen a similar, that can be compared with Satyam. But this is very different. You have a bankruptcy process, so you can take it to a bankruptcy court. That's one way. Bottom line, Naresh Goyal has to go. I mean, this band-aid solutions cannot go on till eternity.
Right. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all of the panelists for joining us. The last word over here, at the end, what we've come to is there are questions, and these questions need to be addressed. Questions on passenger safety, questions on whether if I book my ticket on a jet flight today, whether I will be able to get on board that flight or whether it will get cancelled. Those are two major questions that both the airline needs to answer, as well as the DGCA and the government, if the government is planning on bailing out the airline. The other big thing, should they use public money? Now, panelists were very clear. They were vociferous. In fact, 4 out of 6 panelists believed that the airline should not be bailed out with public money. It is a business that Mr. Naresh Goyal entered into. He entered into it with his eyes and ears open. He brought in his money. He brought in a lot of shareholder money. Now, if the business has failed, it is up to him to bear the brunt. If he owes money to the banks, it's up to him to ensure that he pays off the banks. And if we do have extra money left over, if the government does have extra money left over, they would do well to use that money to bail out Air India instead. Thank you for watching.